Hello and welcome to the CBB SuperShow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. Excuse me, the niche sports connoisseur that you know and love. College basketball, we are knee deep in it. We are grinding through conference tournament week. It is a wild one, man. It is a really, really fun time. Hopefully, you guys did great yesterday with green screens and window trips. It was a hit or miss with some of the results, but overall, I think it was a pretty solid night, and props came through once again. Uh, if you're new to the show or a returner, please all come together and make sure that you hit that like button for us. Helps us a tremendous amount. All interactions in the algorithm-based world that we live in just helps the show and the actual channel a tremendous amount. And please make sure you're subscribed so you do not miss any of the shows that are coming up. In next week's schedule, we are going to be live every single day. All right, so we have a 10-game main slate on tap. We're going to just jump right into it. It's an earlier lock, like 250 PST, 550 for those of you on the East Coast. So that's going to be a bit troublesome because, these early locks, the other slate's barely ending. It was a real grind, not going to lie. It was a real grind for me today with the way that the early is just kind of, still full steam ahead, and then having to process the numbers, projections, all of that good stuff. Obviously, the main slate pricing doesn't come out until later in the morning because they games playing so late in the evening. So this tends to be a pretty tough week in terms of, man, we're just grinding our butts off and trying to make things happen. So appreciate your guys' continued support with that. Article dropping for those of you who are on the Discord and the FTN community. The article is dropping here any minute it's in the editor's hands, and then projections are going up thereafter. I know it's an earlier lock today, but have not been playing around or grinding the games much, just been typing away and getting after it. So being that it's a day show, you can count on Mason dropping by at some point. I hear him milling about. Should be dropping in here any minute. And then you got this guy behind me here. Feels like it's a good time to come and show me some love. So let's get into the slate here. 10 gamer, pulling it up. Let me get my screen going. Feel free to ask any questions, comments, concerns, drop anything. We'll cover some core stuff at the end and any best bets that we're looking at as well. All right. Oh, I can see the article just dropped on the site too, so we're good there. Okay, where is it? Move this. All my stuff is out of alignment here, so let me just get that fixed. There we are. All right, we're off to the races now. First game on the slate that we're going to talk about. Excuse me. I'm going to start losing my voice here. Too early for that. Iowa versus Ohio State. This is a total of 154.5. Ohio State is a 5.5-point favorite. Our projected starting lineups look like the following. For Iowa, Peyton Sandfort, Josh Dix, Drew Thelwell, Seydou Traore, and Lash Dembele. On the Ohio State side, Devin Royal, Micah Parrish, Bruce Thornton, John Mobley, and Sean Stewart. Injury designations, nothing really to worry about. Owen Freeman is out. We know that. And overall, this game, man, for an Iowa game, it really doesn't have a ton of intrigue for me. Typically we're wanting to stack for and against Iowa games because they play at such a fast pace. We know they don't defend at all. There should be a ton of good projections for this one. And overall, just from our brains watching games, we know Iowa games are great. But I don't really like this spot whatsoever. And it seems like the projections tend to agree with us. There's not a lot to like here. Let me just get this sorted the right way that I want it. So really, the only one that projects like super well is the dreaded Sean Stewart, who is very cheap at 4.3, but you know the deal on him. He's going to eke his way to 20 minutes, and he might not actually get value. So Theoretically, he should, and this is a great opportunity for him to do so. Just has to stay out of foul trouble. What this game is shaping up to be a great GPP spot. Guys like Devin Royal, Micah Parrish, Bruce Thornton, all of them can destroy in this matchup. John Mobley's there at 6'1". We know he takes a ton of threes. He projects pretty decently, so you could look there. Although I do feel the bust potential on him makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Might we see some chasing from the industry on Bryce Sandford, who had a big game last time out, but his price is up there at 5'6". A little bit leery there, but the minutes have been safe. And overall, there's just not a ton that I like in this particular game. Drew Thelwell is still cheap at 4.9, but Brock Harding come off the bench last game, played mid-20s minutes, and was in there in crunch time over Thelwell. Thelwell dropped to about 17, 18 minutes in that last game. Might we see Harding step back in the starting lineup? Definitely possible, but Thelwell is nowhere near the lock button value that he was last slate, although he is still very much in the player pool. I'm going to be treading lightly there, and I'm going to be way underweight compared to where I think the field will be. The player that I think, there he is, the player that I think will be the most intriguing and has the highest upside to maybe land on the optimal is Devin Royal, sitting there at 7-1. So we have him right around 14.7 rebounds. I do think he has major double-double upside just because this Iowa matchup is so great. Has to stay out of foul trouble, but he's definitely going to have that opportunity to put up a big number if he can. What are you doing? You're just too fast, man. I can't even keep up with you. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We'll keep it rolling. DePaul versus Georgetown. This is a total of 145.5. Georgetown is a 4.5-point favorite. Definitely in some betting upside here on DePaul. DePaul just beat Georgetown. And I think they have the opportunity to do so again. Projected starting lineups here because both teams do have some injury designations. You're welcome. JJ Traynor, Troy D'Amico, Isaiah Riviera, CJ Gunn, and Layden Blocker. On the Georgetown side, Jordan Burks, Micah Peavy, Malik Mack, Drew Fielder, and Jaden Epps. Here, you want to grab one of those? Why don't you grab one of those and bring it down? Bring the cause figure. Grab that one. Okay. Ready? Come on. Bring them over here. Bring them over here and find the trains. Go put them on the trains. Okay? Good job. Good boy. Injuries here. Thomas Sorber out. We know that. Caleb Williams questionable. He came back, played like 5 minutes, re-aggravated. Now he's highly questionable. On the DePaul side, we know David Skogman and Connor Enright are out. And then NJ Benjamin is considered highly questionable, borderline doubtful. Let me pull up that. This is definitely a game that I want to get involved in. Now, it's going to be hard for DePaul to win a game back-to-back here, but I don't really have that much confidence in Georgetown. They're going to have to shoot well. Does feel like this is a game where they'll just have Micah Peavy put the team on his back and have one of those 60 spots that he's done in the past. He rarely ever projects well, which is frustrating, but we know the upside is there, and it makes him an elite GBP play because of it. And he's 10.8K, which is just, it's an astronomically high price at 10.8K to pay for PB, but he has done it before. And this is a good matchup against DePaul. Our main team looks here. CJ Gunn, who's there at 6'8", the Indiana transfer, really likes CJ Gunn. He doesn't get rostered as much as he probably should be, but this is a spot where I absolutely have interest. It's a little bit earlier. You know, it's a long slate all day. We want to have some PMR to make some moves because inevitably that's going to happen, but I'm more than happy to start with Gunn. They didn't have the best game against Georgetown, 17 points, 2 rebounds. Did play 31 minutes, and he took 14 shots, so that volume's going to be there. The game before that against Providence, he threw down a 45, so that upside is there for Gunn. Buddy, you're going to have to not, okay? Okay. Isaiah Riviera there at 7K. I'm more apt to play Gunn, especially that he's 200 cheaper, but Riviera did have a super base game against Georgetown last time out. 48, 21, 9, and 6. Messed around and nearly had a triple-double. It's all right. It's all right. Took 12 shots in that one. Now, Providence game wasn't as good for him. He played way less minutes because of a injury designation that had happened, but overall we can expect him to play 39 to 40 minutes. And DePaul's rotation for this game is going to be pretty tight. We're not going to see them dipping deep into the bench. This is a very good spot to look at DePaul for betting purposes as well, simply because they have no stress, no pressure. Nobody expects them to go. They don't have, obviously they want to advance, but if they don't, it's no big deal. So they're going to be playing free, and the teams are dangerous when they are able to play that way. Georgetown's going to be playing a little bit tighter. They have a little bit more to lose. So coming out, blocker, Gun, Riviera, they're going to be able to shoot. They're going to look good. They're going to be able to play free and loose. JJ Trainer is there at 5'1". I know he hurt our feelings a few weeks ago on the slate. I was at St. John's game when he was 3-4, had a rough outing, followed it up with a 20. He had a really nice outing against Georgetown. Go take it in the house and look at it. Putting up back-to-back 30s against the likes of Providence and Georgetown. So he is the one that interests me quite a bit. Forwards this year, we're not as hard up for forwards. In years past, I was like, I wish I had another guard slot. 5 guards is enough. There's no forwards. Like this year, I have rarely felt like, I needed more guards. Forwards, I've had several slates, especially lately, where I have felt like I didn't have enough forwards, even the early slate today. So ordinarily, Trainer at 5'1" be a lock button just because positional availability, but he's maybe not necessarily that way because we have so many forwards available to us on every single slate lately. But he does project well, over 4X. Many players do. DePaul mini stack, GBP game stack, absolutely all the way. This is a great one. Now, Malik Mack, 6'1", Jaden Epps, 6'5". Those are your top 2 projected Georgetown plays. Jaden Epps, there are weekly, maybe even nightly meetings about Jaden Epps in the DFS community. If you're to a point where you're trusting him now, this would be the spot to do it. I expect tons and tons of volume from him. But the problem is if those shots aren't falling, it can get away very, very quickly. And if it's not, or DePaul comes out and punches them in the mouth early, hits some threes and gets a lead, we're going to see Micah Peavy hero ball, which is actually just going to destroy the value for Malik Mack and Jaden Epps. The problem with Malik Mack, even though he projects so well, he's the 3rd, 4th, sometimes 5th option, even without Sorber. And we've seen these games where Epps goes into FU mode or Micah Peavy goes into FU mode. And if you don't know what that is, there was an old Ben Simmons page 2 on ESPN, like decades ago. And they had this whole write-up and talk about FU mode. And it's just basically like Super Allen Iverson, like back against the wall, put your head down, dribble into a crowd, throw up circus shots, do what you have to do, 50-footers, whatever. That's what FU mode is. Peavy and Epps have that in the arsenal. Malik Mack, maybe not so much. That's okay. Gonna deal with the distractions here. I appreciate you guys' continued patience there. So Mac, probably more of a GPP look. I don't know that I would get there in Maine just because of that when he gets shut out and shots don't always go up. He's going to play 35 plus minutes, but that doesn't mean anything in particular. In a perfect world, just as it shows there, yes, he would surge over 25, maybe even hit 30 and be on the optimal, but trust with this Georgetown team just isn't there. Nice thing is, Ed Cooley's their coach. We know from his Providence days, he's not going to have a deep rotation. And hell, half his team is hurt, so he can't anyways. Drew Fielder is no longer, and he hasn't been for weeks, the auto play without Sorber. His price is leveled off at 5. It took people a while. Like he was still 40-50% owned even after it kind of ran out and teams figured it out like, hey, let's not let this guy continue to beat us. He's there. He's going to get the minutes, but not a ton of interest there for me on Fielder either. Just mainly that decision on do you have the testicular fortitude, as Mick Foley would say, to roster one of Jaden Epps, Malik Mack. But CJ Gunn is going to be my guy, not just because he's top projected either. You guys know that about me. I'm not just going to plug and play the guys at the top of the sheet just because. But Gunn has been a player of mine that I've rostered a lot, and he has been the posh play several times this year as well. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Computer's moving slow. Cal versus Stanford. Cal, just a quad overtime game last week, a double overtime game yesterday. The Cal stat came through for us on the early. It's going to be tough for Cal. They got to be tired here. Playing Stanford, it is a 138.5 total. Stanford, 5.5-point favorites. The projected starters here for Stanford, Jalen Blakes, Isaiah Sellers, Maxime Reynaud, Ryan Agarwal, and Aiden Kamen. On the Cal side, Andres Stojakovic, Ritis Petritis, Jovan Blacksher, Mady Sissoko, and Jeremiah Wilkinson. Note about Sissoko, he does observe Ramadan, which means no food, no water until nightfall. that's, we've seen tons of athletes, Keem Olajuwon, and go through this. He went through it yesterday. So just kind of that special note, because that can lead to extreme fatigue, exhaustion, all of that stuff. Injury designations here. Evan Stinson for Stanford is questionable, not a big deal necessarily. And then Joshua Ola-Joseph is doubtful. He's been out for the last few games here. When I pull up these numbers, you're going to see a ton of guys projecting well. Stanford, just a got to be a tired Cal. Their back's against the wall too, so I expect them to come out, but they're reliant on that shooting. And as several of our community members have pointed out, in these tournaments, the team's so reliant on shooting, getting those tired legs, and really just kind of falls apart. And we've seen some really good plays not pan out because they're gassed. So you can see here, Stanford stacks in play. Maxime Reynaud is under 10K at 9.6. I expect him to be heavy chalk. Anytime he's under 10K, he is. So no problems there. He should absolutely dominate. And then you have a decision, because a two-man Stanford stack in your main build kind of feels like the right move. Whether that's Jalen Blakes, who's very cheap at 5.7, Benny Geeler, who's been giving them some solid reserve minutes, only 4K. Ryan Agarwal has really stepped up and grown up quickly. Isaiah Sellers is only 4.8. Sellers did well for us on FanDuel the other day. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go with this Stanford group. I think Maxime Reynaud, clearly one of, if not the top pay up when you look through the list here. Peyton Sandford, VJ Edgecombe, Bruce Thornton, Eric Dixon, Norchad O'Meara, Micah Peavy. I like Hunter Dickinson here in that matchup, which we'll talk about here at the end. So Mad Max just definitely is the top pay up here on the slate across the board. The second look that I'm kind of considering here is Isaiah Sellers, because he's been so especially lately, mediocre. I don't expect a lot of people to click him in. And he's at that weird price 4.8 where he's still value, but he's closer to 5K. So mentally, it kind of messes with people. I think Jalen Blake's at 5.7 gets a sizable amount of ownership, and he's okay. And then you have, of course, the Agarwal and Benny Geeler looks that we talked about. Agarwal is actually improving a lot. He is like the perfect complement to Maxime Reynaud. He is playing off of him very well. He's taken a ton of threes out of the double teams. He's just ready and firing. He's played 30-plus minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. He's taken at least 5 triples in each of the last 3 games, and he popped a game against Notre Dame in which he pulled down 12 rebounds, so showing some upside there. There hasn't been a ton of consistency with the floor, but at 5K, he's absolutely a main team look. So one of Blake's, Agarwal, Sellers, that's a tough decision, one of those flips. If you run multiple lineups, rotate them through. If you run only one lineup, good luck. Geeler as a GBP value at 4K. You see against Louisville, only 10 minutes, 2 points. That's the scary part. But against SMU in 28 minutes, he put up 26 fantasy points. That's the great part. Minutes-wise here, kind of settled in. Do expect him to play. Maybe have him a little bit high projected at 29. I might have to adjust that slightly, but he's definitely a guy there at 4K that deserves consideration against this Cal team. I did consider last night briefly betting Cal plus 5.5, but after thinking about it a little bit, I just decided to go away. But I do think this is a Stanford win, but Cal will shoot themselves in it early, but possibly shoot themselves out of it late. So we'll see how that shakes up. But yeah, on the Geeler side, let's change that to about 7. Still a pretty fair projection. All right, moving on to the next game here. LSU versus Mississippi State. It's a total of 145.5. Mississippi State 8.5-point favorite. Have put Mississippi State SEC future on the table there. It was worth the shot. I've been talking about this team all season. They've kind of hit a rough patch. But they absolutely have the personnel to make a run in this tournament. And plus 1,700 where we got it is a favorable enough number to kind of sprinkle that and take a dart and hope for the best. So we'll see. It starts here with LSU, an LSU team that is extremely banged up. Now, this is a weird spot because I could see Mississippi State absolutely just, kind of trip over themselves and lose this game and really put themselves in a rough spot. But I could also see them put together one of their best performances of the season. I don't think there's a lot of middle ground today for this one. I'm just very confident that Mississippi State gets it done. As usual in LSU games, lots of guys project extremely well. Let's pull up the projected starting lineups as it stands right now. Jordan Sears, Cam Carter, Robert Miller, DJ Billy, Derek Fountain for LSU. And then on the Mississippi State side, Riley Kugel, Josh Hubbard, Cam Matthews, Michael Nwoko, and RJ Melendez. Corey Chess and Victorious Miller are both already ruled out. They've been rolling without them for the past few games. And what that's meant is more minutes for my guy Mike Williams and more minutes for guys like Robert Miller, who's now starting, Damian Collins, kind of in this weird spot with him. And we've seen a lot more Derek Fountain as well, who is timeless. And if you believe in late career revenge narratives, this is one for Derek Fountain. Jordan Sears is the big one. If he starts at 5'2", expect him to be like 90% owned, somewhere in there, even on a 10-game slate in high dollar single entry cash. If he doesn't start, I think it's obviously still worth playing, but there's a lot more downside. And if people just kind of auto-click him in without any worry or concern about starting lineups, there's big leverage to fade a highly owned Jordan Sears off the bench. If he's starting, he's just going to chuck up so many shots. And you see, as a projected starter here at 31 minutes, he is one of the higher projected players on the slate. I do like Mike Williams a lot. His price is creeping up, but it's still very cheap at $4K. He's just with no Victorious Miller, he's absorbing so many minutes. Played 27 last time out. He's put up a pretty decent number. Nobody really rosters him. He is one of my favorite values just because he has the ball a lot, and he's shooting a ton in the last few games. The efficiency hasn't been there, and that's been a major problem, but his cheap price and continually increasing minutes make him an ideal value piece. And he put up 22 against Texas A&M with 8 points, 4 rebounds and assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. He took 11 shots there. I don't think people realize how much he's been chucking. 4 of his last 5, he's put up at least 9 shots. However, he shot 27%, 40, 30, and 33%. So they're not falling, but those shots are there. And we can get him to knock down 2 or 3 triples today against Mississippi State. He's going to absolutely obliterate his value. And he really might not be that owned because of the other value on the board. Sears, everyone's going to go there. Cam Carter's an excellent GBP look. Robert Miller's down there at 4-1. He was awful last game, but he has a chance to be really good if he can stay out of foul trouble here. Although Mississippi State has some drivers, I'm not very confident in Robert Miller's ability to stay out of foul trouble. Damian Collins at 4-9, perhaps a little bit of a sneak. Now, on the Mississippi State side, every time they're on the slate, I always say the same thing. Hey, Riley Kugel's been good. We liked him last slate, but don't get it twisted. If he gets into foul trouble, if he misses some shots, if he's ineffective, they will turn Claudell Harris loose. If Harris is not doing well, they will turn Sean Jones loose. We see it. It's a 3-man rotation, hot hand situation. Now, Kugel was fine. He was coming off the 30 against Texas, had 12, 3, and 1 in 23 minutes against Arkansas, but his minutes drastically dropped. Only 23, and he still basically made value, which is nice. He's at 4-9 now. Now, what we saw from Claudell Harris, especially when Kugel got the early foul trouble, a ton of minutes in the first half. He put up a huge number. I believe he had 15 or 16 fantasy points by halftime. Second half, Kugel played a lot more, so he finished with 22, but he was knocking down shots with reckless abandon. 4 of 9 from long range. It was one of the better Claudell Harris games he's had of the last 2 months. He's there at 4-5. What it comes down to with Kugel and Claudell Harris, and to a lesser extent Sean Jones, who's only 3.8, it's tough to use them as a main piece. I think you're just talking about rotating them in GPPs at this point. I do always like RJ Melendez. He's another one on FanDuel and DK that just people don't roster. I think a lot of game logs chasers get caught seeing some of his down performances and say, I can't live with this, but he's an excellent rebounder. He takes a ton of threes. He's playing consistently in the mid-20s range for minutes. Sometimes that spikes to 30s. This is just a really good spot for him against LSU. Now, these two teams just played, 11 days ago, and Melendez had some serious foul issues against LSU, which completely bricked him out. He only played 17 minutes in that game. So it's kind of disguised a little bit because people, if they're not looking as close, might not realize it, but I do like RJ Melendez. And I realize he's not the super value that he was at earlier in the season or even earlier this month. At 5'3", though, there's still a lot of damage that can be done there in a positive light. So I'm a big fan of his as usual. The last time they played, it was an 81-69 victory for Mississippi State. Cam Carter had 23. Nobody else really did a whole lot. Mike Williams had 8 and 2 in just 13 minutes. Now expect him to play 25. And then we saw 30 piece from Josh Hubbard, who doesn't ever really project that well. But as far as GPPs go, a Cam Carter, Josh Hubbard lineup, you just have to do it. Those two are going to be trading shots, and at the end there, if it's a close game, you can expect them to both live at the free throw line. So that was a big game for him, 30 and 4. Riley Kugel had 12, and then it was just a bunch of mediocre stat lines in a game that should have been a lot more fantasy friendly. I think that's something people are going to look at, and maybe this game comes in a little bit lower owned than it probably should be. But at a tournament setting here, there is no tomorrow necessarily. I expect both of these teams to put on for us. All right, next game. Oh, let me get that off. I'm sorry. Forgot that was on. Trying to get through this so quick. It's been a long, long day. But we are out here. Okay, there we go. Sorry, guys. All right, next game here. It's weird. Kansas State versus Baylor. Sorry, 138.5 total. Baylor's a 5.5-point favorite. K-State coming off the big win last night. Coleman Hawkins absolutely broke it with nearly 50. Projected starting lineups here for K-State: Coleman Hawkins, Brendan Housen, Max Jones, David Ngason, and Doug McDaniel. Baylor side: Rob Wright, Norchad O'Meara, Langston Love, Jalen Celestine, and VJ Edgecombe. Only injury designation here is Josh Ojiawana, who is out. We know that. They're going to have everybody else in the mix. Baylor already pretty shorthanded. K-State, they've gotten healthy despite losing some guys, so they've got the bench pieces here. Hawkins last night was a benefactor of major foul trouble to Ngason and Doug McDaniel. He was already starting off really hot, but he just continued to play all the minutes in the world. And price has gone up slightly, but only 7-2, so still very much in play. I think people will just rerun him in a favorable spot against Baylor. Brendan Housen's price has gone up to 4.7. He's still projecting well. He had a bunch of threes last night and paid off. He was 22% last night at sub 4K. And I know it was a plug your nose play, but he was just so cheap in what he allowed you to do. It was surprising. I'm probably not using him today at that increased price of 4.7 just because that gets in the range where there's so many other plays, but it's a sub 4K play. He was just a pretty hard fade for me to get away from. Rob Wright is cheap, 5.1. Do like Rob Wright here. I think we'll see a lot of semi-balanced builds that include Rob Wright and a lot of stars and scrubs type builds that also include Rob Wright. This is a situation here where I think he should be where he should be and where he will be. Where he should be is 40% or higher owned. Where he will be, probably more like 20% because, he's when the team's healthy and they've got these options available, he's obviously not the alpha. He has the capabilities of putting up some pretty huge numbers and has shown that in the past. But he has been fairly average. He's hit that freshman wall later than some of the other guys did. He's been under 20 fantasy points in 3 of his last 5, and that's why this price has dumped so much. We're talking about a guy who has shown an upside of nearly 40, and his price has crept up over 7K only a month and a half ago. The minutes are still there because they have to be. The shots are still there because they have to be. He shot 1 of 9 against Houston. It's Houston. I'll give him a pass for that. He shot 3 of 8 against TCU, had a nice number there at 24, and 5 for 14 against Oklahoma State, nice number there at 23. Cincinnati on the road, tough place to play. He struggled there, didn't take as many shots, under 15 fantasy points. Definitely a spot here against K-State, though, where he can come alive. Very interested in him, and you can see the projections match that as well. In their prior meeting against K-State, it was on January 22nd. He played 33 minutes, and he took 11 shots. So we're focusing on those minutes and that volume. He only got to 16 fantasy points because he shot 3 for 11. But again, the volume and the minutes are there. And the difference between then and now, he was 6.8K then. He's 5.1K now. Really hard to get away from Rob Wright when he's right below Langston Love. He's right ahead of Jeremy Roach and Jalen Celestine. When you line those 4 players up, and if you say price doesn't matter, who do you like the best? I mean, maybe I guess you could say Langston Love, but how do you not go with Rob Wright and his upside over those other guys when price is so darn close amongst them? So I'm pretty high on Rob Wright. Feels like tonight's Malik Moore play and Langston Reynolds play. Reynolds worked out really well. Moore maybe not as much, but he did okay. But this is just kind of feels like a no-brainer spot for Rob Wright. So could come away with this one with Wright and Coleman Hawkins. I don't like rostering Coleman Hawkins. As you saw with Ngason, though, he's just so handsy and gets into foul trouble so often that Hawkins may end up playing 38 minutes, maybe even more here, especially if this game stays close. You see, I have at a 37-minute projection, over 30 fantasy points. All right, Bluffy has popped in here. Says, what's up, man? I'm so ready for next Thursday, Friday. Taking the days off, going to the casino and watching some ball. Hell yeah. I actually I didn't make anyone do anything, but I highly recommended to my wife that she took the Friday off because there are some first-round games in the Pacific Northwest. Got my older son to take it off. And yeah, some big plans there to watch some games. Always a great time. It's an elite move. If you're in a job, so I'm going to sidebar here for a minute because we have a few. We're moving along pretty well. If you're in a job where you have to request time off like really far in advance, it's an elite level move, A-tier move to look into where the first, that Thursday, Friday, all day basketball is and request that time off. Because as you get closer, if there's any other sports fans that work with you or just people in general that need a day off, they're going to be like, oh no, the tournament's coming up. I need a day off. And they're going to go to that request off book, or they're going to go to their boss and they're going to see, oh, Bluffy already requested that off. Sorry, he's had that requested off for 9 months now. You have to work. Sorry. So it just an elite tier move to do that. So I used to do that all the time when I worked in the brick and mortar buildings back in my retail management days and traveling across country. That was something that I always did on key sports dates, especially the tournament, because there's really nothing better than the all day Thursday, Friday games. It's just more wake up, watch games, go to bed after the games, wake up, do it again. Really fun time. Hope you have a good week, man. Enjoy the family. Yeah, I always do. Appreciate it. All right, let's get into the next game here. I'm tripping out because I got notes, right? I'm somebody who likes to be prepared. And on the Google Doc, it's showing me somebody's on it. But I don't know who or what would be on it. Kind of weird. Anyways, let's move on to the next game here. USC versus Rutgers. Total of 152.5. USC 1 point favorite. Starting lineups here for USC as usual with the 4: St. Thomas, Chibuzo Agbo, Wesley Yates, and Des Caloud. And then right now it's been Rashawn Agee, so we'll have him projected as your 5th starter. On the Rutgers side, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Dylan Grant, Jeremiah Williams, and Lathon Somerville. Somerville did not start. Zach Martini did last game for some festivities, but I do expect Somerville to get back into the starting lineup. The main takeaway from here is, trusting USC, which is always hard to do because their bench pieces. There's going to be somebody that comes in off the bench that plays a million minutes, but it might not be the player who did it the game before. It might be somebody like Jalen Shelley who played 1 minute only. So you have to be really careful with using anybody on the USC side that isn't one of those core 4 starters, or in this case, AG, who is safe enough to use. St. Thomas he's really cheap. He hasn't performed to the level that maybe we're used to seeing from him when he was at the mid-major level, right? But man, the 5.5 tag on him is very appealing. And I always usually have to kind of turn him down because his rates are so strong that he projects pretty well. But this is a kind of a weird one. I think people will just auto-click him in, and I definitely am close to doing that myself. But lately, the minutes have been a little bit rough. 23 against Washington, 23 against USC. Now, he did foul out in the 23 minutes against Washington. There wasn't any foul trouble against UCLA. The main concern here is that he's just not taking shots. Like the last 5 games, 3, 4, 4, 2, 7. Now, his peripherals are strong, and at this price, he can definitely get there by getting 8 or 9 rebounds, 5, 6 assists, some steals. He can do all that without having to score double-digit points. Agbo, Yates, and Cloud are shooting so much, it doesn't leave room for a lot of other players to get theirs. And the emergence of Rashawn Agee as a post-interior threat here, especially later in the season, I mean, he's only 3 games removed from putting up a 66, for God's sakes, against Oregon. It just doesn't leave a lot left over there in terms of scraps for St. Thomas. So you can see he projects extremely well, but it's one of those ones where just caution a little bit because he has been this price before. He has been in great spots before, and he has not come through. As far as Agbo, he was auto when he was in that 5K range. Now he's up over 6K, so he's just okay. Wesley Yates is still pretty expensive. Des Cloud's still pretty expensive. They're playable. These are GPP looks for sure. And AJ, you can see almost 4.5x because he has great rates. Fantasy point per minute number for Rashawn is extremely high, and 6.4 is a reasonable price for him. Now, on the Rutgers side, it's really just the decision of Ace Bailey. And when he's in that sub 8K range, he was awful last game, had foul trouble. I expect him to be chalk every time that Ace Bailey's under 8K. I haven't documented it supremely, specifically, or diligently, but I do know the last like 3 to 4 slates that Bailey has been under that mark of 8K. He has been at least 30 to 40% owned, and I expect that to continue today. Dylan Harper, an elite GPP look at 9.4. Expect him to get into some sort of shoot off with Cloud. There's going to be a lot of turnovers in this game, though. Not necessarily a worry on DraftKings, but I do think we see a lot of turnovers, and that means steal opportunities for the players in this game. But Bailey, St. Thomas, and AJ are your top projected plays there. All right, Seton Hall versus Villanova, total of 126.5, lowest total on the day. Villanova, 10.5-point favorites. Our projected starting lineups here: Seton Hall, Garwi Dual, Dylan Adewusu, Isaiah Coleman, Prince Aligbe, and Godswill Irene. On the Villanova side, same starting 5 they usually always run: Enoch Bokai, Wooga Poplar, show favorite, Jordan Longino, Jameer Brickus, and Eric Dixon. Your main injury designation here is Chance Jenkins. Just hasn't been playing much at all. Don't think we'll see him for the tournament whatsoever, and it should probably be a short stint for Seton Hall. But no fault of their own. Coach Holloway is great. They just do not have any NIL, and I feel for them. They need to figure it out. Initially, before we did some of the DVP modifier stuff, Dylan Adewusu projected like amazing. He's been really good lately. 6'3", very much in play. Peripherals are strong. He has multi-steal upside, and he takes a ton of shots. He didn't shoot particularly well last game, but he takes a ton of shots. Him next to Isaiah Coleman, those two are going to be absolutely leading this team in shots attempted. Either one can be used. Coleman, more of a GBP look, although he's very cheap at 7.3 and very interesting. And then Adewusu, I think, is a main team look. I'm not going to be too interested in the Garwi Dual, Prince Aligbe, those types. Scotty Middleton did have a pretty nice game and played over 20 minutes last time out. He is only 3.8K. If they keep starting Godswill, that's fine. I do think there's at least a chance that we could see Middleton start, and that has happened several points earlier this year. And you see in the game in which they lost 81-50 to UConn, Middleton played 27 minutes off the bench. So at least some interest there because he's in that sub 4K. Probably more of a GPP value because he's going to allow you to open up and kind of get some more pay-ups there. But that is an intriguing price on him. No one else really projecting well. Seton Hall is slow. Their defense is good. Offensively, they're pretty gross, but they do enough on defense to make it ugly. Wooga Poplar at 8.5, still worth a look in GBPs. Now, I mentioned there's going to be a lot of steals in the last game. Poplar is somebody who can rack up steals in this game as well. And I do think he bears at least some consideration in large field GBP looks. And if you're building any alts, Wooga is somebody who, sub 8% today, has a ton of upside, racks up steals, plays 37 minutes, takes a ton of shots. He's rebounding at an elite level. Like this year's explosion as a rebounder has completely come as a surprise to most people, myself included. And he's just been a really steady performer. And when he gets to that spot where, he hits 6 of the 12 threes that he takes, in addition to 3 or 4 steals, 9 or 10 rebounds, 2 or 3 assists, a block, we're talking about a true explosion game. Can absolutely happen here against Seton Hall. He had 12 points, 12 rebounds last time they played Seton Hall, which was back on February the 26th. The thing we have to be aware of, though, is in these tournaments, you got to try to keep your guys fresh. And if Villanova can get out ahead on Seton Hall early, even though they don't have much of a bench, they can. You never want to let your foot off the gas, but they can treat their starters with kid gloves as much as possible, which means instead of 38 minutes for Lugo, maybe we only see 32. And once they get that big lead, I just think they're going to play keep away here and just kind of keep guys healthy, and we'll see. So the best thing here, if you're rostering Lugo or anyone else, is to hope that Seton Hall can keep it way closer than the 10.5-point spread would suggest. It was a 59-54 win for Nova on the road against Seton Hall last time they played. I think for what it's worth, it's probably going to be between 6 and 7 points for most of it. So we should get that full allotment of minutes. But it's always in the back of my mind on these early tournament games where guys might save their legs or try to get a couple of water breaks extra in there for their various guys so that they're not tired out. We saw like Mo Odom and Pepperdine, 4 games in 4 nights. Delaware was 5 games in 5 nights. Like, you just get tired out. It doesn't matter how great of an athlete you are, how young you are. That's just going to wear you out to a level. So you gotta try to conserve as much energy as you can, especially in a tough conference like the Big East. All right, let's get to Syracuse and SMU. Syracuse just drop kicked Florida State. What a terrible game from Malik Ewing, man. Terrible game. Very upsetting. Total of 149.5. SMU 8.5-point favorites here. JJ Starling, Eddie Lampkin, Jair Davis, Lucas Taylor, and Jaquan Carlos as your projected starters. They'll still likely be without Elijah Moore. Excuse me. SMU, Chucky Harris, Matt Cross, BJ Edwards, Submit, Yigitglue, and the returning Boopy Miller, who came back last game and put up a big 30-plus fantasy point number. You're going to look at this when I pull up SMU and think, wow, that's a big number. Boopy Miller hasn't been cheap like this in a while. Can we get some Wake Forest Boopy Miller action up in here? I think we can. Syracuse, they got their win over Florida State. Jameer Watkins beat them up a little bit, but overall, a lot of things went right for Syracuse. And Eddie Lampkin did his thing. Now, SMU, defensively, they're suspects. So I do think Syracuse, there's some guys we can look at here. JJ Starling is an elite GBP play at 7.4. Eddie Lampkin's 8.6. He's worth the sprinkles in some places. Chris Bell projects pretty well if he gets the minutes, but that's an if, right? But on the SMU side, you see Boopy Miller, the highest projected player on the entire slate. He's under 7K. He's going to play 35-ish minutes here against Syracuse and get a ton of shots up. Absolutely lock button play on Boopy Miller. Figure out the way that you can get him in. Start your lineups with Boopy Miller. That is my advice of the day right there. He'll be popular. Matt Cross, probably not as popular there at 8-1, but I like him as a pairing partner with Boopy. Samet, if he stays out of foul trouble, he's going to be banging with Eddie Lampkin. Nerve-wracking there for me, probably not too involved. Chucky Harris at 6'9". He's been great. Anytime they're missing a piece, if that's Boopy Miller or another guard, that's when we really want to go to Chucky. He's been magnificent for them without Miller. With Miller around, it takes a lot of that upside off. If he was 5'9" instead of 6'9", I'd still be interested, but at nearly 7K, there's a lot of downside there. And he's $200 more than Miller at this stage. And same could be said for BJ Edwards. So a lot of his value's tied to his steals at 7.4. Hard for us to get there. So Miller and Cross, definitely the two SMU plays if we're stacking. But Miller is going to be across the board core for me in all formats. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Next game, Oklahoma versus Georgia. We have 2 games left here. This is a total of 147.5. Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite. The injury news, Sam Godwin will be out once again. That means Mo Wag will start. Our Oklahoma Sooner starters, Jeremiah Fears, Jalon Moore, Bryson Goodine, Duke Miles, and Mo Wag. On the Georgia side, Asa Newell, Silas Demery, RJ Godfrey, Blue Kane, and Dylan James. Oklahoma games have been pretty fantasy friendly for a Porter Moser coach team, which with defense being kind of the most important thing there for them. It does surprise me still every time I see an Oklahoma game just completely shoot out in a way that just doesn't even make any sense. This is one with 2 defenses who have been in the past or historically pretty good. but we have several guys who project well here. Asa Newell, if he can stay out of foul trouble against Oklahoma, that front court. Jelon Moore's good, but he's been banged up, sick lately, and just clearly not 100%. And Mo Wag's probably just going to get into a bunch of foul trouble there trying to do anything against Asa. So Asa's there at 7.5. He's an elite front court option in all formats. Look for him to have a monster performance, maybe even a slate-breaking performance. Kind of a Janai Broom light. Look out for him. His own worst enemy is himself, though. As long as he didn't get in foul trouble, I do like him to put up a massive, massive number. 5x plus, honestly. Mo Wag starting at 3-4. Yeah, he started last game. He was pretty chalky, foul trouble, ended up playing less than 20 minutes. The main benefactor there was Luke Norweather, who ended up playing like 20-plus minutes there for Oklahoma. He's not necessarily a play if you're trying to do some anticipatory type things like, oh, Mo Wag's going to get into foul trouble here again. He probably will. Let me go to Northweather. He played the 22 minutes against Texas and put up 18.5 fantasy points, but I'm not to a place where I'm trusting him at all. In this Georgia front court, Santos Surreal, who's a shot blocking freak, Asa Newell, who's super athletic, first round draft pick most likely. RJ Godfrey is versatile. Like they have Dylan James is going to harass you to no end. Like it just feels like a real bad spot for somebody like Northweather and Mo Wag. So I had listed Wag as a potential single entry main lineup value, but that's with the thinking that you got some pay-ups in mind that you want. Throw Mo Wag in and hope that he can give you 5, maybe 10. If he gives you 10, you're doing somersaults. So keep that in mind. As far as anybody else, Bryson Goodine, his price has crept up 5-1, but he's going to shoot a ton here in this game. Duke Miles, 5-3, those secondary pieces. And then the GVP looks for Jeremiah Fears at 8.9 and Jelon Moore at 6K. The Jelon Moore price of 6K feels pretty baity, for lack of a better term. Like we're going to walk right into that and be like, man, he's way too cheap at that price. But because of the fact that he's just been banged up and sick and clearly just not himself, I'm really not comfortable. And you see, even at 29 minutes at this price, he's he's almost 4x. He's there. He's fine. But I just feel like there's way more downside there. If he had the upside or the projections had him, at like a 4.8x or a big number, that would make me take note and kind of maybe take that risk with him, especially in an alt build. But I'm just not feeling it there. Georgia side, Tyrene Lawrence is 4-3. Expect him to be chalky, even if he doesn't start. They've been rolling with Dakota LaFew. We've seen Dylan James as a starter, so likely getting Lawrence off the bench. He was kind of dead there for a while, unplayable. Missed some games, and it seemed kind of like, yeah, man, that to end his career like this, it's kind of sad because we know from his time at Vandy, he's put up some pretty big games. But something awoke in him. He had the revenge spot against Vanderbilt there in 28 minutes, 13-5 with 2 steals, over 20. He scored 19-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. Only 4.3K. He was 3.5 against Vanderbilt, which was better, but 4.3 is still very cheap. So Lawrence is a main team value play, obviously. And then you have Dakota LaFew there for 100 less at 4.2. He put up a 26 against Vanderbilt. He's more tied to his shooting than Tyron is, but he will shoot himself into value at this price if you let him. 2 of his last 3 games, he's taken double-digit shots. All right. And that brings us to the last game on the slate, which is UCF versus Kansas. UCF, they did it. They got a win. They advanced. Big win over Utah. Looked like Utah was smacking them around in the second half. They took control. Shout out to Keanu Dawes of Utah, who we used on the night slate. Man, he's going to be awesome. Probably going to transfer out. I don't know, but he looked great. A snafu on Stat Broadcast. One of the beats for Utah had reported he was going to be out, but Stat Broadcast did not change it, so that threw some wrenches in things. We just kind of said screw it and went for it on Dawes anyways, and Lawson Lovering. So kind of a weird situation there. I bring that up because we're not always going to get starters before these tournament games lock. But Stat Broadcast has been wonky lately, and they've been posting, especially if it's early, if it's more than 15 minutes before a lock and you see a weird starting lineup, that's more often not going to change. I want to throw that out there because I've been having a lot of people reach out to me and ask me about that and see some starting lineup differences. If you see anything weird, it's always best to go on the socials, check that team social on Twitter or whatever to see what the posted starting lineups are if they have it. So be advised, sometimes stat broadcast isn't always right. It's pretty close. It's pretty good, maybe 98.8% of the time, but there is that small percentage. Anyways, UCF, great win for them. Now they get to go against Kansas. I'd love to see UCF win this game. I love this UCF team. They've got to win out to try and make some noise in the postseason, but hey, they got the talent to do so. Keyshawn Hall, Darius Johnson, Motiem, Jordan Ivy Curry, who did return last night, didn't start, but I do think he will today. And then Niles Machowski, who's been really good for UCF in the spot starter minutes he's been playing. Kansas, we're talking about Rylan Griffin, KJ Adams, DeJuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, and Hunter Dickinson. As far as injury designations go, Jalen Sellers and Shaquille Moore basically doubtful. Mikey Williams questionable. Now we saw Dallin Debo Coleman start last night, but Curry came off the bench and played 26 minutes. Dallin played less than 15. So keep that in mind. And because of Ivy Curry's return, it completely murdered JJ Taylor as a value. We talked a little bit about JJ Taylor last night on the show, but remember we said if Ivy Curry returns, JJ Taylor's not playable. He played like 3 minutes. So just kind of throwing that back out there. If you want anyone from UCF, it's best, honestly, to just stick to their starting five for now. Now, let's pull this up because game stacks, that's something that I think is we like to stack here on the Super Show. It was something in the collegiate DFS level that a lot of people were resistant to for many years, but a lot more people embracing it now. And this is a game where you absolutely want to stack if possible. UCF games are typically fantasy friendly. They're not to the level of like ASU and Kentucky and these teams, my core four teams that I've got to stack for and against when they're on the slate, but they're pretty damn close. We have a tremendous amount of plays here. Rylan Griffin at 3.9. If he continues to start playing over 20 minutes, expect him to be a popular value. No problem eating that chalk. Zeke Mayo finally broke out of his mini slump there. He had the social media stuff where, God, people were saying some pretty rotten things to him, threatening his life and racist things. And like, no matter how mad you are, you really shouldn't be doing that at all. Anyways, he's at 6.6, so he priced up a little bit more from where he just was, but this UCF matchup is really good, and I do think Mayo is going to be awoken here in a way that really puts him in a position to end up on the optimal tonight. Put up 38.5 there against Arizona. The minutes have been there regardless. It's one of those spots where, yeah, he's been breaking out, but the minutes have continued to be there. He's gonna shake it off. He finally did. He also had 4 rebounds, 6 assists. Very complete game for Zeke Mayo. You see DeJuan Harris at 6.7, also projecting pretty well. This is a game where he's going to rack up a ton of assists. He's probably going to get a lot of steals. UCF is a turnover machine, especially lately. So like Harris there, I would have liked to have seen him be a little bit cheaper, but when you go back and look, he really hasn't been cheap much this year. The DK's kind of just force locked him at 7K or above. And this is actually one of the few times where he's actually been under 7K. So a little uncomfortable there for me, but he's definitely worth a shot. In some formats, would prefer Mayo over him straight up, but there's a path for Harris to wind up optimal here as well. And then, of course, the decision on Hunter Dickinson at 10.4. He'll probably be chalky just because there is this value on the slate, and people are going to play Dickinson and Maxime Reynal together. I'm fairly certain of that. If I'm fading Hunter today, and I'm certainly not recommending that necessarily, but I'm going to want multiple other pieces of Kansas. So if no Hunter Dickinson for me, Rylan Griffin, Zeke Mayo, maybe even have to take a shot on somebody like KJ Adams, although I really hate doing that and doesn't really call to me, but he does project at almost 4x, and he's been pretty safe. And this matchup against UCF, once again, is very fantasy friendly. On the UCF side, Keyshawn Hall is still underpriced at 8.3. He was mega chalk. First time in a long time that Key Hall was like mega owned. Bad first half, but second half he absolutely dominated. Against Kansas, I'm with it. I think he goes back to being like posh play-esque territory here, where he's just not going to be that owned by the masses. So I'm on board. And then you do have a bit of value on the other side at 3.7K with Niels Machowski, who's playing solid minutes and contributing. And he's kind of like playing within himself, like clearly a role player, but he's just doing enough, not forcing up bad shots, not losing the ball. It's just, making things happen. So I don't mind him. I know the UCF value last night with JJ Taylor, may have spurned some people, but you just had to be very careful because if Jordan Ivy Curry was back, that play was never going to work. Now, even with Ivy Curry around, Niles has been starting. I don't think he's going to be the one to lose a starting spot. Maybe Dallin, but we'll see. But he's a secondary value. And we don't even really need him anyways because of Rylan Griffin. But just if you want to get some differentiation in your lineups, Niles is a way to do that. Rest of your GBP looks here, Darius Johnson, Mo Tiem, Jordan Ivy Curry, all of those looks. I think they have the ability to push Kansas here. And then, of course, Flory Badunga at 4-6. This one's crazy because we know he's not going to get enough minutes with Hunter and KJ Adams around unless there's major foul trouble. But he was projecting like if he say they just beat up on UCF and he gets like closer to 20-ish minutes, like look at that. His rates are so effing incredible that if he gets anywhere close to 20 minutes at this price in this matchup, it's just like an auto 5x play. So if you're running those alt lineups, Flory Badunga is absolutely a guy that you want to get some exposure to. You can't probably pull the trigger in a main lineup because he's not going to get enough minutes, but he doesn't necessarily need them. The fantasy point per minute number and his rates across the board, especially as a shot blocker and a rebounder, are truly incredible. This is why when he was, KJ Adams and he was playing 30 minutes, like Badunga was 80% owned because he's just absolutely murderous. He's going to be a big deal next year. Possible preseason player of the year in the conference if he doesn't transfer. So as you can see, a lot to like here. Let me go back and fix that so nobody's lock buttoning Flory, but I do think he gets an opportunity to play some additional minutes here tonight. So how many pieces of this one would we want? It's the hammer play. At least 2, right? Probably 3. UCF games have just been so good. If you would have done it last night, Darius Johnson had a nice one. Mo Tiem panned out. Obviously, Keyshawn Hall worked out. So there's just so many different paths here in this game. For me, prioritization on Zeke Mayo and Rylan Griffin along with Keyshawn Hall. I always play Keyshawn Hall, though. He's just one of my guys that I never fade. I'm not going to start now. So you can keep that in mind as you're building. If you don't have the room to fit him and you're not sure if he's going to hit over 40 tonight, makes sense. But we're not talking about a 10K, 11K at Keyshawn Hall here. We're talking about 8-3. Possibly the last game of the season before he decides if he wants to go pro or hit the portal again. He's going to put down a big game. Massive, massive heater of a game. Mark my words, Keyshawn Hall is going to break the slate tonight. All right, let's look into that. Let's pull this up real quick before we get out of here. So they lost. This was the road game. So, obviously at home, like Kansas was coming off that horrible loss. This was in early January, and they lost by like 100 million points. It was like 50. But they played them close on the road on Kansas and Allen Fieldhouse. It was 91-87. And UCF pushed them to a point where they were very nearly going to upset them. In that game, Keyshawn Hall put up 34 real points. Now, he got to the line 11 times, making all of them 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. They absolutely had no answer for him. He hit 5 threes. He's a really tough matchup for them. Darius Johnson had 19 points and 5 assists. Jordan Ivy Curry had a near triple-double, 10, 7, and 8. And then Mo Tiem, even for good measure, despite foul trouble, had 17 and 4. So everybody on the UCF side was having a pretty damn good game against them. We saw Zeke Mayo. He hung 24. Hunter Dickinson had 24 and 7. Flory Badunga, this is when KJ Adams was still out, had 10 and 11 with 5 blocks, 2 steals. We love Flory Badunga. Just play him over KJ. Come on. And then Rylan Griffin had 4 points, a steal, 2 assists, 4 rebounds. We'd be fine with that stat line from him. And it is worth noting that DeJuan Harris was not playing in that game, so probably a little bit to do with the fact that they were a little more closer than they should have been. But this is a game that I think has the ability to go off the rails and definitely can. So get all the exposure that you can here. What's up, buddy? I tricked you. You did trick me. No. What is it? No. Oh, ghost. All right, so the core we're looking at here, Boopy Miller, Rylan Griffin, and Zeke Mayo. So 2 Kansas and Boopy Miller. Those are the 3 that I'm just locking into my lineup. Say, Mommy. You want to sit up here for a minute? We're almost done. No? All right. Mommy. So that's the core I'm looking at. Any best bets here? Let me pull up the current lines. Gosh, after 1 o'clock already. I did sprinkle a bet on Howard, by the way, too. Which are like plus 1,700 to win the MEAC. They're minus 2.5 today against Morgan State. Love Howard. Love the Howard team to not only win today, but take the auto bid. Temple minus 2.5 versus Tulsa. And then the other one here, NC Central plus 1.5 versus Delaware State. Betting some HBC schools here, but I feel really good about the various spots that we have. And then Louisiana Tech, another team that I did put a dart throw on to win their conference against Middle Tennessee, plus 1.5 on Louisiana Tech. All right, so that will take us to the end. Let me not deprive you guys of this last part here. We'll get all the teams loaded back up so you can get a nice long look at the player pool projections here. I think we solved. There were some folks a while back who were saying that it was kind of blurry. And mentioned if you're watching it on mobile, just give it a minute to kind of reset itself. It only takes like 90 seconds, and then it'll be clear. If you're watching on a laptop or computer, you shouldn't have any problem whatsoever. All right, let me just punch all these back in. Mason. I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. This is a good time too while I'm doing this too. If you haven't already, to please make sure you're subscribed to the FTN Network YouTube channel so you do not miss any of the notifications over the next few days. We are going to be going live every single day next week and a lot this rest of this week. The Selection Sunday show is going to be a very fun and interactive thing that we do. We're also going to be welcoming co-hosts, yes, but anyone that wants to come on and talk about a team or anything that they want to do. We're going to treat it like the old Blog Talk Radio days where we had people call in and guests. We're going to do that with the video form there. So if that's something when you're watching live you're interested in, you'll be able to let us know and we'll patch you through there to kind of chat. It's just a hangout session that we do each and every Selection Sunday. All right. You're all right. Hey. All right, let's do that. You know, I'm just about done. Okay. Hey, Daddy. What's up? What are you thinking about? Oh, there we go. All right. Get a good long gaze at all that goodness there. So as you can see, Miller at the top, Sears if he starts, Rylan Griffin, obvious value, Zeke Mayo, Jalen Blakes, St. Thomas, all underpriced options for the most part. Didn't really even talk about Kashawn Murphy. Didn't even really talk about Kashawn Murphy much in the Mississippi State blurb. His minutes have been down, but he's there at 6'5". He does have 40 fantasy point upside in this spot, especially if anyone in front of him, like Michael Nwoko, Cam Matthews, get into foul trouble. And you can see with mid-20s minutes, he still projects really well. So that's an interesting GBP look as well. Top pay up for me, Maxime Reynaud, even over Hunter Dickinson. And then a sneaky value look for me is still going to be Mike Williams. Not Mikey Williams of UCF, but Mike Williams of LSU has really taken on a bigger role here with all the injuries that LSU has. The shot volume, just want to repeat, has been very high for him. The efficiency hasn't been there. There's going to be a slate where he puts it all together. He's got one left here before the season ends. Why not today at 4K? Mike Williams on the optimal. I think that would work, yes. All right. I think that will do it. Appreciate you guys for continuing to support the Super Show here. We're just over an hour and a half, some change here before the next slate. About to check in on some early slate results here and see how we're looking. You can follow me on any and all social media platforms at DubDeuces85 and at FTN Fantasy. We have a ton of content still coming out, still planned. not only the conference tournament previews that we just finished, but of course we're going to have bracket selection stuff. We're going to have contests. We're also going to be doing NIT play-in, crown tournament coverage. There's going to be bets and DFS for that. Like, there's just a ton coming up here. Please make sure that you're locked in, following, and have notifications turned on, not only for the FTN network channel, my Twitter as well. That was going to give you access, or you're not going to miss any news. I'm also retweeting all the news there as well. And then if you are interested in kind of in broadening your horizons, as they say, the bottom there's a bunch of links. The FTN fantasy pricing page is there, and you can see the link with the discount that is currently still available. You can sign up for a month long instead of the year long to kind of test us out and see what we're all about. MLB around the corner. We're already doing spring training stuff. We have a very, very sharp MLB team. Come for the college basketball content, and myself stay for the MLB content. By the time we get to college football in late summer, you'll have a pretty sizable and tasty bankroll and be able to bully the lobby a bunch and get those green screens and window trips with us. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. We'll tentatively be planned to come back tomorrow morning, but that might end up being a night show here, depending on how that goes. Again, these back-to-back slates this close, they're a grind. And it was difficult for me to fit it in, but we did it. And if talk about efficiency, a good preview for Mike Williams tonight, just over an hour on the SuperShow for a 10-game slate. Would you ever think could do a 10-game slate breakdown in under 2 hours? I guess so. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. As always, good luck tonight, and I'll see you next time.